Hi, my name is Tom Roberge.
And I'm Emma Ramadan, and we co-translated Marcus Malte's The Boy from French together for Restless Books.
My sort of draw to translation is because when you start reading in another language, as an American, when you start reading in another language, when you're fluent enough, you actually start to see the beauty of a different language and stop thinking about it in terms of what does this mean? How would I say this in English, right? You start recognizing the beauty of another language. And of course you want to share that with English readers. And so that's my sort of like primary sort of interest in translation and what like my underlying sort of goal is with, on each sentence and paragraph and as a whole. But I'm curious if the academic sort of world and everything that you've been taught sort of either if it aligns with that or if it goes a little bit astray.
I think for all of my studying of translation in an academic setting, my answer is exactly the same as yours, which is that I was interested in translation. My draw to translation is that if I read something really beautiful that's not available to English readers, I want them to have a chance to read it. And that I also think there are so many books that get published in this world. I think I heard a statistic that about 400,000 books get published in America every year versus about 400 movies that get made every year or come out every year. And there's just so much. And so I think we already have so much beauty, so much wonderful literature in the world that exists. We just don't have access to it all. I'm more interested in sharing books that are not yet available in English with people than I am writing my own or adding to kind of the glut of literature today. I would much rather find these kind of gems that have come out in other languages and make them available in English. I think a really nice thing about translating is that it's not solitary. People think of it as a solitary task. People think of translators sitting at their computers like machines with their dictionaries or their online dictionaries and whatever, but it's actually very interactive. I mean, if you're not, oftentimes I'm interacting with the author, I'm asking questions of the author, I'm building a relationship with the author. For example, I've translated a couple of or 3 books now by Anne Goretta, and so she and I have a really unique relationship. Or with co-translating, that you and I didn't actually have any contact with the author on this book. We didn't speak to Marcus Malte at all, but we had each other, and you and I were sort of deepening our relationship to language through this experience, but also to each other. And every kind of co-translating experience that I have had has been really special and has brought me really closer, given me a new understanding of my co-translator in a way that you don't get at, in any day-to-day experiences. Going to lunch with you is not the same thing as negotiating like an edit on a translation together. The kind of words that you like to use are not necessarily the kinds of words that I like to use. I mean, you take one sentence out of this book, you and I would have translated it completely different ways. We're informed by different vocabulary, by different perspectives, different upbringings, different ways of reading and using language. And so that negotiation, I learned things about you that I never had learned, from all my years of running a store with you or being close to you. It's you get at a certain layer that you don't really get at in any other way. What was your experience like of the co-translating? I know.
But my co-translating experience, like I said, it was sort of look, I already seen your process. I was familiar with your process. I'd helped you, I'd read many drafts of many other things you've translated, helped with edits, and to get back like the language thing. I mean, the number of times you asked me for help with like, I don't know, anything sort of like construction or a car or like something that's like just far outside of your like lived experience that you just don't know anything about. Like yes, you could spend an hour searching for it on the internet to make sure you got it just right. Or you could just ask me, right? Like, and it's so much faster. And there's a lot of things I think like that I learned, and like you were saying about language, like I noticed your tics and I have tics. Like I will always remember, like, you have this tick for putting the corner of the street, right? Which, because in French, it's like 2 words, but we have a word in English that is street corner, right? And you would get to it eventually in like your later drafts, but it's one of your ticks, right? And I forget, I'm sure I have them too, with certain adverbs that I prefer over, because French adverbs, like, there's like a false cognate sort of thing where everybody assumes that they see a word and it's basically the same word in English, but in fact, like en fait, right? Like in fact means like 8 different things in French, whereas it has like a very specific thing in English. And so like we both had different ways we like to use it at different times. And I don't know, it was interesting to sort of, and to be clear, like when I say I picked up French, I didn't study it at all. I just happened to live in a country for a couple of years where French was like the predominant language. So I had to learn it, but I was just speaking it. I wasn't necessarily reading it. And then years later, you know, I was working at a French bookstore and sort of revisited my French and started reading in French because I had access to all these books. And that's when the translation.
That sort of informed how you and I came to our process of co-translating, because since I had studied it and I was kind of more familiar with reading it and how it's kind of written on the page, I was doing the first draft. And then because your background is in editing and you are very good at editing and often would help me edit things that we weren't even working on together, you would do the second draft. And then our third draft was sort of this like coming together of different little sticking points and negotiations of, I really like this adverb and I hate that adverb and whatever. And so it was actually kind of like a perfect pairing for this book. I was happy that you and I were co-translating this book together, because I would say I'm definitely more used to weird, experimental, hyper-specific fiction, and you kind of read the more very European, kind of masculine, historical, like not historical necessarily, but kind of with historical influence. And so again, I think I as soon as, you know, I was asked if I would translate this book, I immediately said, can I co-translate it with Tom? And I just knew that it would be the book would be better for it and the translation would be better for it.